This question is all about inheritance and genetics, how traits like fur color are passed from parent squirrels to their babies, also called kits. It focuses on alleles, or versions of a gene, that determine fur color. The key information, capital B, dominant, equals the gray allele, lowercase b, recessive, equals the black allele. Each squirrel has two alleles, one from each parent. The combinations result in different fur colors. Two capital B's equals gray. One capital and one lowercase b equals dark brown. Two lowercase b's equals black. Now here's the question. Which statement best explains why two dark brown squirrels could have kits that are gray or black? Let's break it down. The correct answer, D. Each parent squirrel has both types of alleles, gray and black, to pass on to its kits. Here's why this is correct. Dark brown squirrels have the heterozygous allele combination. One gray allele, capital B, and one black allele, lowercase b. When two heterozygous parents have babies, they can pass on these combinations. The Punnett square shows all of the possible combinations for the offspring. 1 in 4 will be gray, 2 out of 4 will be dark brown, and 1 in 4 will be black. This set of questions asks you to analyze a bar graph showing how the percentages of gray, dark brown, and black squirrels in a park changed, or didn't change, over time, from 2010 to 2015. Let's look at question 32 first. Question 32. In this population of squirrels, the gray fur color is the blank, advantageous for survival, because from 2010 to 2015, the percentage of gray squirrels is always blank of the total population size. Correct answers. Most, over 50%. Explanation. When you look at the graph, the gray squirrels make up the highest percentage of the population every year. They are always above 50%, and sometimes even close to 80% of the squirrel population. That tells us that gray fur is likely more advantageous for survival. If more gray squirrels survive and reproduce, it means that fur color is helping them survive in that environment. So the best way to complete the sentence is, in this population of squirrels, the gray fur color is the most advantageous for survival, because from 2010 to 2015, the percentage of gray squirrels is always over 50% of the total population size. Question 33. Based on the data in the graph, which two types of additional information would best help to interpret the data in the graph? Correct answers. The size of the predator population in the park each year, the size of the squirrel population in the park each year. Explanation. If we want to understand why gray squirrels are doing better, we need more context. Two really helpful things to know would be, how many squirrels were there in total each year? That helps us understand if the percentages are out of a small or large population, and whether the total number is increasing or decreasing. What about predators? If predators prefer hunting dark brown or black squirrels, that could explain why gray squirrels survive more often. Why not the other options? The types of trees might affect camouflage, but we'd need more direct info to make a conclusion. The total number of squirrels in the U.S. isn't relevant to this local park. The government group maintaining the park doesn't tell us about biology or survival. Question 34. Explain how the pattern in the graph supports the claim that the genetic mutation for black fur was at some times harmful and at other times helpful to survival. Enter your answer in the box provided. The graph shows that the percentage of black squirrels in the population changed over time, which supports the idea that the genetic mutation for black fur was sometimes harmful and sometimes helpful. From 2010 to 2012, the percentage of black squirrels increased, suggesting that black fur may have provided an advantage during those years, such as better camouflage or protection from predators. However, after 2012, the percentage of black squirrels decreased, which could mean that black fur became less helpful or even harmful for survival. These changes in the population over time support the claim that the mutation for black fur affected survival differently depending on the year and conditions in the environment. This question is all about potential energy, the stored energy an object has because of its position, especially its height above the ground. The higher the object, the more potential energy it has. In this problem, students are asked to look at 4 points on a roller coaster and compare the relative potential energy at each point. Which two statements correctly describe the relative potential energy at various points on the track? Let's go through the choices one by one. At 1, the potential energy is greater than the potential energy at 3. 1 is higher and therefore has more potential energy. At 2, the potential energy is greater than the potential energy at 3. Yes, 2 is much higher than 3 and therefore has more potential energy. At 3, the potential energy is greater than the potential energy at 4. Incorrect, because 4 is higher, so it has more potential energy than 3. At 4, the potential energy is greater than the potential energy at 2. Again, that's not true. 2 is higher and has more potential energy. This question is about understanding how energy changes form as a roller coaster moves along its track. Specifically, it focuses on the conversion between potential energy, which is stored energy due to height, and kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion. At the beginning of the ride, the roller coaster is pulled up the large hill from point 1 to point 2 by a motor. At point 2, the train has a lot of potential energy because it is at the highest point on the track. As it moves down the hill from point 2 to point 3, that potential energy is transformed into kinetic energy as the train speeds up, and some of the energy also becomes thermal and sound energy due to friction and noise. When the roller coaster reaches point 3 at the bottom of the hill, it has very little potential energy and a lot of kinetic energy. As the train moves uphill again from point 3 to point 4, kinetic energy is transformed back into potential energy as it gains height. However, since point 4 is lower than point 2, it cannot regain all the potential energy it originally had. Some kinetic energy still remains at point 4 because the train is not as high up as it was at point 2. This shows how energy is conserved but transformed into different types as the roller coaster moves through its path. This question is asking why the second hill of a roller coaster is lower than the first hill. The diagram shows that the roller coaster is lifted by a motor up to the top of the first hill at point 2, which is 36 meters high. After that, the roller coaster moves on its own, with no additional energy added, using only the energy it gained from the first hill. The second hill, at point 4, is only 20 meters high. Students are asked to select the statement that best explains why the second hill is lower. Answer choice A says the roller coaster would need more mass to absorb enough potential energy to move up the second hill. This is incorrect because mass doesn't help the train absorb or gain more potential energy on its own. The potential energy comes from height, not mass alone, and the roller coaster's energy is determined by how high it was lifted, initially, not how heavy it is. Answer choice B says the roller coaster would have a higher velocity as it moved down the second hill, potentially creating a dangerous ride. This is incorrect because the second hill is not what determines the coaster's velocity, it's the hill before it. The second hill being lower doesn't increase the speed, it actually helps control it by not requiring as much energy to climb. Answer choice C says the roller coaster would need a source of energy other than the potential energy from the first hill to make it up the second hill. This is the correct answer. Since no new energy is added after the top of the first hill, the roller coaster must rely on the energy it gained there to get through the rest of the ride. If the second hill were taller than the first, the roller coaster would not have enough energy to climb it without stopping or slowing down too much. Making the second hill lower ensures the roller coaster has enough energy to keep moving. Answer choice D says the roller coaster would have even more kinetic energy as it moved down the second hill, potentially creating a dangerous ride. This is also incorrect because a lower second hill would actually reduce the amount of potential energy being converted into kinetic energy, not increase it. Lower hills help regulate speed, not make the ride more dangerous. Therefore, the best answer is C, because it correctly explains that the roller coaster cannot go higher than the energy it was given from the first hill unless additional energy is added. This question asks students to evaluate two possible explanations for why energy is lost as a roller coaster moves along the track. The two claims are: Claim 1, energy is lost because of air resistance, the air pushing back against the train as it moves. Claim 2, energy is lost because of friction between the train's wheels and the track. Students are then asked to match 3 different observations to the correct claim. Each observation gives a clue about whether air resistance or friction is the main cause of energy loss. The first observation is, the train moves faster after the cars are streamlined. This supports Claim 1 because streamlining the shape of the train reduces air resistance. If the train goes faster after being streamlined, that shows air resistance was slowing it down before, which supports the idea that air resistance is a cause of energy loss. The second observation is, the tracks are warmer after the train has passed. This supports Claim 2 because heat is a common result of friction. If the track is warming up, that means friction between the wheels and track is turning mechanical energy into heat, which supports the idea that friction is causing energy loss. The third observation is, the train moves faster after oil is applied to the wheels and tracks. This also supports Claim 2 because oil reduces friction. If the train moves faster after oil is applied, that means friction was slowing it down before, which again supports the claim that friction is responsible for the energy loss. This question is about how kinetic energy and velocity are affected when the mass of the roller coaster train increases. The students tested how the roller coaster performs when carrying different numbers of full cars loaded with students and recorded both the velocity at the bottom of the first hill and the calculated kinetic energy in joules. In all three tests, whether the train is empty, half full, or completely full, the velocity stays the same at 28 meters per second. However, the kinetic energy increases as the mass increases. This makes sense because kinetic energy depends on both mass and velocity. The formula for kinetic energy is kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Since the velocity stays constant, the only thing changing the kinetic energy is the mass. More mass means more kinetic energy. The question asks, if 2 more full cars were added to the train and filled with students, how would the kinetic energy and velocity compare to the 6-car train? Based on the data pattern, the kinetic energy would increase because the total mass of the train is greater. The velocity would remain the same, just like in all previous tests. So, the correct answer is, the kinetic energy would increase and the velocity would remain the same. Question number 40. To save money, engineers want to replace the roller coaster train with a new train that has half the mass of the original train. The new train has a mass of 1,650 kilograms when empty. The new train will still reach the bottom of the first hill with a velocity of 28 meters per second. Based on this information, answer the questions below. How will the kinetic energy of the new train compare to the kinetic energy of the original train when both are empty? What property of the new train causes the difference in kinetic energy? Example response. The kinetic energy of the new train will be less than the kinetic energy of the original train when both are empty. This is because kinetic energy depends on both mass and velocity, and even though the velocity is the same, 28 meters per second, the new train has half the mass of the original train. The property that causes the difference in kinetic energy is the mass of the train. Since the new train has less mass, it will have less kinetic energy even at the same speed. This problem is about a group of students trying to understand why temperatures in their town have been getting hotter over the years. They see a graph that shows global temperatures and carbon dioxide, CO2, levels both going up over time. They're trying to figure out what is causing the rise in temperature. They are asking the question, what is causing this change in the temperature of the town? To answer that, they need to look for a question that helps them explore possible causes, especially involving human activity, like burning fossil fuels. Correct answer, B. Is the change in temperature correlated to a change in human activities? This question is best because it helps the students find out if human actions, like producing more CO2, are connected to the rising temperatures. That's what they need to know to answer their main question. Question number 42. In this problem, students are trying to figure out how carbon dioxide and temperature are related. They set up an experiment using 3 beakers to test different conditions that model Earth's atmosphere. Beaker 1, open to the air. Beaker 2, sealed with air inside. Beaker 3, sealed with half air and half carbon dioxide inside. They use heat lamps to simulate sunlight and measure the temperature and carbon dioxide in each beaker. The goal is to help them investigate the claims. Is temperature causing carbon dioxide to rise? Is carbon dioxide causing temperature to rise? Or are they just both increasing without being related? they need to figure out which words best complete this sentence. The student's investigation should blank the interaction between Earth's atmosphere, greenhouse gases, and blank. Correct answers. First blank, model. Second blank, sunlight. Why? The experiment is a model of what happens in Earth's atmosphere. The heat lamp represents the sunlight, which is important for studying how greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide trap heat. So the completed sentence is, the student's investigation should model the interaction between Earth's atmosphere, greenhouse gases, and sunlight. In this problem, you're looking at a graph that shows how the temperature inside 3 beakers changes over time when placed under a heat lamp. Beaker 1, not covered. Beaker 2, covered with plastic wrap. Beaker 3, covered and contains extra CO2. You're also given 3 student claims. Temperature changes cause CO2 changes. CO2 changes cause temperature changes. CO2 and temperature are not related. Your job is to figure out which student's claim matches the pattern shown in the graph and which 2 beakers you should compare to support that claim. The graph shows beaker 3, extra CO2, heats up the fastest, which is a big clue. Example response. The claim best supported by the graph is student 2. A change in CO2 will cause a change in temperature. The graph shows that beaker 3, which has extra CO2, gets hotter than the others. This means the CO2 is trapping more heat. To support this claim, students should compare beaker 2 and beaker 3 because both are covered, but only beaker 3 has extra CO2. The difference in temperature shows the effect of the CO2. In this problem, you are focusing on student 2's claim. A change in CO2 will cause a change in temperature. To support this claim, you need to collect evidence that when CO2 levels increase, temperatures also increase. You're given 4 choices about where CO2 data might come from. Your job is to choose the 2 best sources that would actually help prove student 2's idea. Correct answers. Data collected from the CO2 sensors in the beakers. This data directly comes from the controlled experiment the students designed, so it's the strongest evidence. Data from outdoor CO2 sensors recorded during periods of cooling. This helps show whether temperature and CO2 are truly connected or not in the real world. If CO2 is high, but temperature is dropping, it might weaken student 2's claim. But if both rise or fall together, it helps support the claim. Why the other options are incorrect. Inside private homes or inside a school gym. These are not controlled environments. Things like heaters, AC, or crowds of people could affect CO2 levels and temperature for reasons unrelated to the greenhouse effect. They won't give reliable scientific evidence. In this problem, student 3 suggests that the reason temperatures are getting hotter in their town could be because there are more paved surfaces, like roads, parking lots, and sidewalks. These surfaces absorb more heat and can make areas hotter. This is known as the urban heat island effect. To support that idea, the student needs to gather local data about how much of the town has been paved over time. Then, they need to choose the best way to show this data clearly. Correct answers. First drop-down, graph. The student is talking about changes in their own town, not the whole state or world. Second drop-down, towns. A graph is the best way to show changes over time, like how the percentage of paved land increased year by year. Final sentence with correct answers. To support this claim, the student should make a graph of the percentage of the town's surface that has been paved over time.